A perfect segue, I think, General Russell, in terms of lessons from '76. I just might underscore one of the big lessons we also learned from Katrina, beyond just the public health issue, is that the special needs populations, that is absolutely critical in terms of how we address those sorts of issues. So, again, getting to the all hazards perspective, and I know we have a lot of FEMA folks and DHS folks who hopefully can engage here in the Q&A. But General?
In thinking about my 50-plus years of experience in influenza virology and epidemiology, it's a wonder that we did make these assumptions about where the influenza virus was going to come from. Because if you look back at history, the 1918 virus came out of a Kansas farm. In '57, the pandemic virus came from Hong Kong. '68, it came from Asia. In '76, it came from an American pig farm, and in the H1N1 virus that appeared in '77 probably came out of a Chinese freezer. So making assumptions about where influenza virus is going to come from and where it's going to go is not a rational exercise. Having said that, I think this virus is going to be a major factor in the coming fall-winter influenza season. That's what it looked like it's doing now. I hope it behaves like a seasonal virus and it doesn't acquire mutations that will make it more virulent. It's not going to get less virulent. No virus is transmitting through populations that become less virulent very quickly. But only time will tell, and we can be prepared for surprises. The influenza virus has an infinite capacity to change. A couple of base pairs will change its virulence. A couple of base pairs changes will change its sensitivity to antivirals. I'm a vaccinologist, so I'll put that bias up front, and I'll make a statement that the vaccines are the most important and the most effective means of blunting the impact of an influenza epidemic. And really the only proven means. We put some faith in antivirals, but as I said, we're only 2 or 3 base pairs away from those becoming totally ineffective. I have absolutely no faith in the other measures of social distancing and so forth. They may change the shape of the epidemic curve, but they probably don't change the area under the curve and the total number of infected individuals. I think the past 5 years, the administration, and mainly HHS, has made some major advances in both vaccine policy planning and supporting major advances in vaccine research and manufacturing. This year was going to be the real-world test of these policies. Current manufacturing methods still depend on eggs, 1940s technology. For most of our vaccines. Contracts were put in place previously. Egg supply was a major limiting factor for ramping up other than for the seasonal manufacturing. So contracts were put in place in 2004 to secure an adequate supply of eggs for contingencies like this, and I think that foresight is going to pay off big time if we have an H1N1 virus as the dominant strain next winter. We're dependent on 5 licensed manufacturers in the U.S. For our vaccine. Only 2 of those manufacturers manufacture domestically. The others are in Europe, Canada, and Australia. So our domestic supply is, at least theoretically, at the risk of major policy decisions by other governments. One major manufacturer in Europe has already committed its entire capacity to the European countries, and we had previously purchased vaccines from that. Fortunately, it probably is not going to make a huge difference. Contracts have been in place for some time for acquisition of vaccines by HHS, and the initial orders for vaccine for clinical trials of the H1N1 vaccine have been placed, as well as an order for the first 40 million doses for a bulk stockpile of H1 vaccine. clinical trials this summer will be incredibly important in determining how this vaccine will behave and how it's going to be used. There's adjuvant in the stockpile and additional orders for adjuvant in place. Research and development over the past few years have proven the value of oil and water emulsion adjuvants to improve the immunogenicity and to reduce the amount of antigen required in the vaccine. That also should play a very important part. If we can reduce the amount of antigen needed in each dose, that greatly increases the number of doses we can put out. So the adjuvant work that was done in the previous few years could pay off really big. One of the problems is the influenza virus never behaves like we want it to or expect it. So whether we have enough vaccines to meet the requirements will depend on how this virus and the engineered and reassorted strains of this virus behave in terms of the yield that the virus produces when it's injected into eggs. And from what I've heard on the grapevine, this virus isn't yielding too quickly to the technology designed to make it grow quickly in eggs. So that may set the time frame back a week or 2 weeks or a few weeks. The results of clinical trials this summer will determine how much antigen is going to be needed in the vaccine and whether 1 or 2 doses will be needed. And that is going to be critically important to determine whether we're going to have enough vaccine or not. My hope is that most of the population has some background exposure to other H1N1 viruses, and so 1 dose may be enough, at least 1 adjuvanted dose. Probably not for children. We may have to do 2 doses. So the public health system is going to be really strained to deal with the problem of delivering these vaccines. The manufacturers are now nearing completion of their requirements for approximately 150 million doses of the trivalent seasonal vaccine, and they'll begin to work on the H1 virus as soon as they get the high-yielding strains. But we're starting in May, and the flu season could start as early as next October, November. Making the 250 to 300 million courses of vaccine will be a challenge to the industry, and for a variety of manufacturing issues, regulatory issues, financial issues, and liability issues, it's going to be a monovalent vaccine. We will not be able to combine it with the seasonal trivalent vaccine. So in all likelihood, we may be using 2 influenza vaccines this winter. I have a lot of faith in the manufacturing industry, but I do think that they're going to be strained to produce a full supply by early in the next flu season. So I expect a shortage in the early part of the fall. The National Pandemic Plan has a very detailed, prioritized list of the populations that should receive vaccine if there is a shortage. But carrying out this vaccine policy is going to be the responsibility of the state and the public and local public health authorities, and it will not be easy. And in addition, in this country we have a mixture of private providers and public providers. It's easy to make a priority list, but it's very difficult to execute on that basis. The HHS has a major program to increase the U.S.-based manufacturing, so we will get into the bind of being stuck with offshore manufacturing and decisions made by other countries. At the same time, we made an effort to replace the old egg-based technology with the cell culture-based vaccine, which theoretically can be scaled up faster and more efficiently in an emergency. Unfortunately, those investments, which I think amount to close to $1 billion. Won't bring those new facilities online until 2010 or 2011. So for this time around, we're stuck with the old technology and all of its limitations. Next time, we'll have better technology. I think a decision to carry out a major vaccine campaign against the H1N1 virus will have to be made this summer, the latest by early fall. And as Jeffrey said, the swine flu experience in '76 outlines the dangers of a massive campaign, the importance of explaining the need for the vaccination, explaining and effectively communicating the risk involved, the risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome for the 1976 vaccine, I think was like 1 in 100,000. My own personal belief is that was due to a contaminating bacterial antigen in some lots of that vaccine, and modern technology will, in the way they purify the vaccines in the modern world, is not going to put us at risk of that. But there still has to be. There is no risk-free vaccination. You have to communicate the risk, and in every vaccination campaign, there's going to be adverse events, whether they're related to the vaccine or not. They're going to come after the vaccine, and that's going to cause lots of difficulties for the public health community, for the medical community, and for the government. One final thought is this business of equity. The capability for manufacturing influenza vaccines is pretty much restricted to the United States and Europe. There's some capacity in Brazil. They build a new plant. There's some capacity in India. I don't know how much is dedicated to flu. There's some capacity in China. But by and large, most of the developing world will not get a vaccine. And if this virus increases substantially in its virulence, then the inequity issues of a vaccinated developed world and an unvaccinated underdeveloped world are going to be major, not only just major moral issues, but they're going to be major political issues, and the political fallout could be very important. There's a lot of new technology being developed. I think the government policy and the Gates Foundation efforts and so forth will bring new technology online, and a lot of it is aimed at producing very inexpensive vaccines so we can vaccinate the entire world if we need to. But those are several years, probably a decade or two off before they get developed and implemented. And having said that, I'll pass it back to our moderator.